Hi, Los. So we are finishing up the month of Oracle in her mystery school, moving into the month of Heavenly Mother. And I wanted to spend some time with one last piece from Oracle. Oracle is entirely or mostly focused around self-authority and indwelling trustworthy guidance. Um, the potency of knowing yourself, knowing what is and isn't for you in a simple way, in a coherent way, and in an unapologetic way. What I want to speak to is anxiety and how that relates to self-authority and the state of personal power that is necessary in order to sit in and deliver self-authority. Anxiety is a really dispersive state, right? So in a state of anxiety, we'll often notice that we're hypervigilant, for one thing. We are kind of outside of ourselves, dispersed, reacting in a way to too many known, unknown, real, unreal, imagined, internal pressures, fears, worries. It's a state of fast, it's a state of agitation. And in a state of agitation, it is very difficult to come in and sink down and be fully here in order to know what is really in your best interest, what is really true, what is actually happening. Are you feeling something true, or are you just really in an anxiety state? From the perspective of the school, everything that moves through us does actually have an alliance with us and to us, and that includes anxiety. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is a way to be with anxiety that can bring it down, bring it in, and harvest the actual protective instinct that's inside of it. One of the things that triggers our anxiety, or that often underlies anxiety, is this feeling that everything's not okay. We're not okay. We're not safe. The worst possible things could happen. It's a deep feeling of just not okayness, and often not knowing what to do, not knowing what's real. And what's challenging about that is, in the state of anxiety itself, it becomes what a state of anxiety needs is a coming in. It needs to feel comforted, held, safe. It needs to know, when we're in a state of anxiety, we need to know what to do. We're confused, we're afraid. Unfortunately, the state of anxiety itself is a dispersed state, and it can be a little bit of a closed loop. Once we're anxious, we are unable then to get down into the place where we can actually help ourselves feel better, help ourselves feel safe, listen deeply enough to know what is the right thing to do, what is safe, what is not, how do we hold what's happening in front of us. So, I've talked about it before as, in a state of anxiety, you're like the cat up in the tree. It's really hard to get yourself down out of the tree or out of anxiety. It's often, having support, having guided practices, having ways that you are supported by another person, another voice, another anything to come down out of your state is often necessary. I'll just put that out there, that it's, the pressure that we can put on ourselves to be so highly independent can really backfire with anxiety, because anxiety, like some other things, really needs architecture around it. It needs support, right? It's something that often calls for interdependence and some help. However, what I wanted to share with you more specifically today is a way of approaching anxiety from within, in the way that you understand your anxieties, and in the way that you work with them, to hopefully actually start to pull out what is inside of anxiety, the truth of it, the true, anxiety is basically like an overblown energy. It's excessive. The way that I see anxiety and the way we work with it in the school in Oracle, we work with a practice called anxiety versus instinct, is that what happens is that we have an instinct, we have a protective instinct, and it lights up about something. And that instinct is protective, it's wise. It's like an indwelling warrior presence inside. It is aware, but it's sober and it's actually calm. It is aware of what's going on, and it lets us know when, sometimes it's like, hey, danger, that isn't safe. Sometimes it's just, hey, I'm aware that something's changing. I'm aware that there's an inconsistency here. I'm aware that I need to be really aware. I need to be very present with what's in front of me. I need to be very discerning with what's in front of me. That sober warrior presence is kind of the first moment. It's the genesis of an instinct that then we often kind of blow out into anxiety. And so what can help with anxiety is to sift down and find that first impulse. It has a sobriety to it. It's simple. And it is the answer to your anxiety often, right? It is the beginning of it. And it's where the cure for the anxiety can be as well, because it is telling you what to do. It's saying, be aware. This isn't right. This is what I see, right? So how to discern between instinct and anxiety so that your anxieties can rest. It's similar to sacred needs. We say sacred needs won't rest until they're met. Something inside of the need is sacred. It must be met. It's part of destiny. It's part of life. It's part of your soul. Similarly, with anxiety, anxieties can't rest until that seed, that voice, that impulse from your protective nature is heard and addressed and given voice, at least to you, if not to others. So the way to do that is to, in some ways, and I just want to say, I know anxiety. I have had quite a journey with it myself, and I know how unruly it can be. I'm not assuming that this is going to be simple. However, I'm wanting to offer guidelines, possibilities for you to explore that could help you disentangle some of the patterning of anxiety and some of the the sense that it's just so uncontrollable. So discerning between instinct and anxiety, part of that is starting to understand, getting clear about anxiety as a state and how it appears in your being. So what happens with anxiety is it's a state that arises in us and then portrays itself in a million different ways. When you're in a state of anxiety, you'll be, all of a sudden, everything's wrong. Everything's scary. Everything's overwhelming, right? That's what anxiety can do, is it can confuse you into thinking that what you're supposed to be addressing or fixing or being aware of are all these things, or are so many things, or are just not actually the things that are really creating the anxiety in the first place. So when you start to understand anxiety as a state of being, what you can do is start to come underneath of the story that anxiety generates into it as a state of being. What is it? What actually happens to you? Like for me, and name it in your body. Like my heart gets tight. My mind, so beyond all the thoughts, what happens is my mind actually feels a little fractured. It feels like it's going in maybe 15 different directions. I feel shaky and a little exposed and raw on a little bit like on the surface of me, on my skin, that's kind of in the place where I meet the world. I become raw and exposed and oversensitive, right? So I've started to understand anxiety as a state of being, and you can find that for yourself. It'll be different for all of us. Maybe you get hot and your cheeks flush, or you get cold and everything constricts. There's really often very specific signals of anxiety, the state of anxiety that you can start to name so that you have more of a handle on it. When you start to notice yourself in that state, you can also start to help yourself know and start to cultivate the awareness that, okay, when I am in this state, when my heart is clenched and I feel fractured and oversensitive, this is not the time to try to fix anything, to address all the things that are going through my mind, to do anything. That's the sign. You can start to use your anxiety state as the signal. So rather than the anxiety state comes and you move into all of these thoughts and all of this excess, you start to notice the anxiety state as a signal, and a signal to do what? Not to act, not to even validate everything that's going on in your head. It's a signal to do what I came up with a little 3 thing. to use your state of anxiety as a signal to you, then to slow down, to settle, and to seal up. From there, then, you can listen for what the actual guidance is, where you will find the self-authority, you will find the need that needs to be met, you will be able to hear what your internal self is telling you, so that you can gradually understand anxiety as the state of anxiety as something that points you deeper and deeper into yourself, deeper and deeper into a sense of safety and knowing and trustworthy alliance with yourself, rather than as something that comes up and makes everything feel confusing and disperses you in a whole lot of directions that aren't really going to serve you. So, slow down. That's the first thing, and that's simple. What anxiety does is it revs things up. Things start to go fast. There's an urgency inside of anxiety. Fix it now. I need to be better now. Oh my God, this is happening right now. There's an urgency, and it is a false urgency for the most part. So slowing down. How you do that, I don't know for you, but breathing, like literally slowing things down, pulling out of conversations, getting off of media, like slowing down the stimulation in your life in that moment. Overstimulation triggers anxiety, and when you're in an anxiety state, overstimulation, even if it's just many things, even if they're kind of mundane and trivial, that's still like asking your internal vigilance, your internal warrior to face, 15 potential threats at once. You want to slow down and settle. So you're slowing, settling. You want to remember that anxiety as a movement in the body is usually like up and out and to the periphery, right? It's shaky, it's vulnerable, it's hypervigilant. It goes like this and out. So settling, just inviting, finding ways to settle. You want to sink down and settle back so that and you can do it posturally. You can do it via practice. These are all just suggestions. We're not obviously going to get deeply into the practices and things, but just finding it in your own being. What does settling feel like? How would I settle right now? For me, actually, at times, I go to bed, I put a cover over me, and I put a pillow on my head, and I settle. I stop all the stimulation, and I settle my being. And I do what needs to be done, and I don't pathologize it. I just care for myself. And in that, I return to a knowing of what's actually going on. So slowing down, settling, and then sealing up. That too is part of, for me, getting into bed and putting the pillow over my head. It's just a moment of being like, I'm going to seal up my container. I'm going to seal up the space around me. What anxiety does is because it's dispersive and it's agitated, it often, you can feel it. It's like you end up in a million places at once. It's very fragmenting. And from that place, it's very hard to make good choices. So sealing up, sealing around yourself, bringing your energy close, bringing your attention close, bringing things close in around you so that your energy is potentized and settling and coming close to you rather than being everywhere else. That's hypervigilance. That's a trauma response. That is a common response for many of us. And it's a difficult one. You have to entrain over time, beyond all the many other things that you can do to work with trauma. It's also an entrainment over time. In training to seeing an anxiety state as a signal rather than letting it go and just take off. Slowing, settling, sealing. Those are 3 movements, three intentions to hold for yourself. I'm going to slow down, I'm going to settle, I'm going to seal. And then from there, you can more readily, more easily listen for the instinct that started the anxiety in the first place. Some of us are more prone to anxiety than others. Some of us are more prone to the kind of heat and the sensitivity and the hypervigilance than others. So some of us have more kind of excessive, more blown out anxiety states in response to really simple instincts, right? But no matter what, whether it's, you're just kind of anxious or you're really anxious, it always starts with an instinct. You're not just a random kind of broken person who has anxiety. It's not, the pathologizing of things has just got to stop. What is true is that what's happening is that some part of your being, your instinct, the part of you that's supposed to protect you, that is really amazing to have and not at all broken and very intact in you, is giving you a signal. It's what happens to this signal after that. So if you can start to settle down and sink and seal yourself up and trust that at the seed, the core of this anxiety feeling is some guidance for you. How you know when you find it is it has a sober awareness to it. It doesn't have the urgency of anxiety. It doesn't have the volume that comes along with anxiety. It's a sober presence, and it's often just saying things like, there's a change happening. Something's off here. I need to look more deeply at this. I need to take more time before I make a decision on this. I mean, it's not the thing about this instinct inside is that it's often actually really simple. It's not freaked out. It's our response to all of it. And that's for so many reasons. That's for reasons of previous trauma, for reasons of lifestyle, it's like, have mercy. We're living in a kind of crazy time. Things can get a little, it's understandable to have anxiety, but so to come into self-authority, you want to look for that warrior presence. Trust that it's there. Don't just write off your anxiety as an issue or as an uncontrollable, inevitable, just crazy thing you have to go through every now and then, or a lot. Know that you can find coherency. You can start to establish or reestablish a relationship with this protective instinct inside of you that will, over time, really ease your anxiety because you've got yourself. for a lot of us, that protective instinct gets interrupted. It gets distorted. It gets repressed. There are so many reasons why it can't just kind of come up and out and be simple. It fights us to get out. We have our own inner conflicts around it. So we're restoring an alliance and a trustworthy relationship to the protective instinct that lives inside of us. And letting states of anxiety, be a signal to us that that presence is alive and well, and that it's not the anxiety we want to listen to. It's that deeper place. And in some ways, just by knowing that when anxiety comes, there's a protective instinct inside of it, and you know that you can find it, that can shift your relationship to anxiety to a place where it is actually there to fortify your self-authority, to fortify your knowing, to fortify your no, to fortify the boundaries that keep you safe. So that's what I would offer to you as this final offering as we're moving out of the month of Oracle, is this intricate kind of woven relationship between instinct and anxiety, and the invitation to start settling that relationship in your life, taking the time to soften, to settle, to seal up, and then to listen. And then to let yourself take action. What can really help anxiety is to know what action to take and then to do it. And a lot of times when you get to that sober, protective awareness, it's really just an awareness. It's simply telling you to do things like slow down, ask more questions, take some space, look deeply, get support. It's simple, and it does have answers for you. And the anxiety then can start to settle over time, right? It's not my wish for myself or for you or for any of us to be in a constant state of dispersion and anxiety, or in an often state of dispersion and anxiety. It cuts us off from, well, not only peace, and not only peace, it cuts us off from its own cure inside of us. It cuts us off from the medicine that we're holding that is the medicine for the anxiety. And we can open up that closed loop and open up what's inside of us in order to actually let anxiety guide us toward a deeper resource than we realized that we had. The protective instinct does not abandon us. And it is just, it's part of the discernment of what is and isn't for you as you're going through life. And the thing about anxiety is it's like, as you're going through life, things are happening, and things are happening kind of fast sometimes. And you have people, circumstances, relationships, you have things arise quickly in the moment. That protective instinct is also quickly in the moment giving you feedback, giving you awareness, giving you guidance. And so if you can start to learn how to contain that, how to seal up around that and listen to it rather than letting it or pulling it up and into this huge anxiety pattern, you can start to relax more and to just, all right, I'm living life. I'm okay. I can face this. I'll know what I need to do. I'll hear what I need to hear. The answers for me will be forthcoming. What I should choose and what I should not will be more clear. So I think that is all that I wanted to mention about anxiety and instinct. And again, just to hold this as part of a bigger movement, which is that so much of what you might pathologize in your world is just an energy in you, an instinct in you, a capacity and a power in you that just needs to be that there's just some learning to do around how do you hold that? How do you listen to that? How do you be with that? We are not living in a world that has a very explicit acceptance, recognition, support for being present and listening to all the subtle and not so subtle emotional and psychic and energy currents that run through our bodies, especially as women, especially as sensitive beings. So these things that get pathologized, depression, anxiety, anger, all the things, remembering that there's actually nothing wrong with them. They're just really big stallions to ride, and we are having to learn how to ride them for our own well-being, how to ride them into the horizon that we actually want to be headed toward, how to ride them toward our destiny rather than into the ground, right? So anxiety versus instinct. Gotta love it that you have a sober warrior presence living in you, just telling you what's up and keeping calm, teaching you how to, over time, be calm, hold yourself, stay settled, stay sealed up, slow it down, and make good decisions from a place of self-authority rather than a place of dispersed anxiety and false urgency. So I hope this was of service and that there were some pieces in here that you can take forward and be with in your lives, in your day-to-day, and in this movement that I think most of us need, which is a little mercy, calming, soothing, and consolidating from all of the dispersion and anxiety and change that's happening in our world. Well, blessed be.